Good morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. That talk show, that vaunted talk show, heard all the way from Cairo to Rockford. Everybody jumps out of bed early in the morning, make sure they have their radios tuned in to 96.3. Well, let's get serious about this. We always try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. Season of giving, folks. If you haven't picked out a charity, this would be a good time to remember. Pick out your favorite charity and be a little extra. If you don't have a favorite charity, go to your minister or your priest and tell them you'd like to contribute something to charity and let them pick it out. And then don't call them and ask them what they did. Just trust them. But seriously, that's this time of giving. A lot of need out there. And so there's more to Christmas than just ho, ho, ho.
Speaking of charities, one of my favorites is the Salvation Army. And I got a child from them with a list of the things this little boy needed. He was 2 years old, and it said he wore a size 8 shirt and pants. And I thought, well, they've got a mistake going here, I think. And I called, and they said, no, he's a big boy. My gosh, when my kids were 2, they wore size 2.
Well, we have to get right down to serious business. We have a fellow came all the way from the East Coast to just appear on WLCN. Almost said WPRC, for goodness sakes. I goes back in there.
You're living in the past.
So why don't you introduce our guest this morning? A very, very important gentleman in our community, man whom I had a lot of respect for down through the years. So be nice to him.
He'll always be a part of our community. Father Laible, we're so glad to see you. And you say that you're happy out there in Washington, D.C.
Yes, as much as I can be, and thank you very much.
I'm glad you qualified that, sir. I'm glad you qualified that as much as you could be.
Yes,
it's pretty hard to be happy out there.
Well, I think they need you and others like you out there. Goodness knows.
Yes.
They have enough trouble. Now, you've changed. You're kind of dealing a lot with the military.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your new job and your new digs and how it's going for you as an East Coast boy.
There you go. Well, I'm the Vicar General for the Archdiocese for the Military Services. Basically, I'm serving as like an executive officer to the Archbishop, the military Archbishop. And so I assist him with the pastoral ministry of overseeing the Archdiocese throughout the world. The Archdiocese of the Military Services was actually created in 1985 by Pope St. John Paul II. And prior to that, it was a part of the Archdiocese of New York. They oversaw all of our Roman Catholic military chaplains who serve our military personnel around the world, as well as our Veterans Administration and also embassies and consulates around the world. So I assist him in that ministry of taking care of our service members and their families throughout the world.
And goodness knows they need you, especially when they're in a far corner of the earth.
They do,
that
yes.
They knew nothing about before they found themselves there.
That's absolutely the case, yes.
And at this season, surely it must be very difficult for them because many of them are far from their family.
Yes, very, very difficult. They're not able to travel, home. Many of them are, on ships maybe or submarines, or they're in maybe remote locations around the world, and it's even more difficult now because of the travel restrictions due to the pandemic. For people to be able to travel and get back home. But even before the pandemic, traveling so far from wherever they might be located, they're several time zones away, and so they easily can't get home for the holidays to be with their friends and their family.
Mm-hmm.
For Judy, for somebody who might have just moved into the community within the last year, I think we ought to go back a little bit and stress the importance of Father Laible to his community when he was a pastor at Holy Family Church. Not only Lincoln, Illinois, but that would include Mount Pulaski, Elkhart, and Atlanta. Were those all under the same mantle, sir? You had 3 parishes besides Lincoln to worry about. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, I was the pastor of the Logan County Catholic Community. Of course, Father Joe is the pastor now. I'm sure doing a wonderful job. But I had that responsibility really for 10 years that included Mount Pulaski, St. Thomas Aquinas, as well as St. Patrick's and Elkhart. Part of that, it was we were linked with St. Mary's in Atlanta and Holy Family in Lincoln. But then 14 years ago, actually about 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, all 4 parishes in Logan County were linked, Catholic parishes were linked together. So I oversaw those responsibilities. And then also, throughout those years, we also had the responsibility of the 2 prisons here in Logan County to provide pastoral care for them as well. So all of that was a part of the ministry in the time that I was here as
You
a pastor.
had to do a real metamorphosis. You don't live in a place like Beeson, do you?
No. Not anymore.
Well, don't
Yeah.
forget, if you're going to rent Beast, don't forget Broadwell and Burtonview.
Well, certainly.
Father, at some point in your young career, you were called, and I think that's correct to say you were called, to be involved in the military as a chaplain.
Right.
And at what point in your career did you become affiliated with the military, sir?
I was in theology school at Kennewick Seminary in St. Louis.
That goes back a long time.
It goes back a long time, yes. And so in 1985, when I was in graduate theology school, that's when I became a part of the Air Force Chaplain Candidate Program. And I did that program for 2 summers. And then after I was ordained a priest, I petitioned the bishop to go into the United States Air Force Reserves. And so I was in the reserves for 9 years. And then eventually, after those 9 years, I joined the Illinois Air National Guard, which is where I spent the rest of my, actually another 22 years there altogether. So I just retired from the military chaplaincy on September 30th of this year after 33 years of military service.
And I might say the father retired nicely in the military. He retired as a bird colonel. That's what we used to call them, bird colonels instead of lieutenant colonels and colonels. One of the things that you did in the military was always very impressive to me, and I thought it had to be a very difficult job. You went to Landstuhl, or how do you pronounce that?
Landstuhl, Regional Medical Center in Germany, correct.
So tell us about those duties in Landstuhl, sir.
Well, back in the days then when the war was with Iraq and Afghanistan, Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom, our warriors that were injured either in Iraq or Afghanistan or somewhere in the Middle East, they would receive initial medical care on the battlefield, and then they were eventually airlifted to Landstuhl Medical Center in Germany, where they would receive additional medical care. Most of the time, the warriors were there anywhere from 3 to 5 days. 5 days would be a long stay, and then eventually they would be flown back to one of our support hospitals here in the United States. So in my 5 tours at Landstuhl between 2005 and 2011, I was there 5 different times. I worked in the pastoral care department, basically as a chaplain and as a Catholic priest, bringing the sacraments, the Roman Catholic sacraments, to our warriors, ministering to them, counseling them, being with them. It was really a great opportunity to bring the presence of God to our warriors who had been through terrible things in a war zone. Anybody who's ever been in combat can appreciate what these warriors have been through and the trauma that it brings to them, not only emotionally, but also physically.
They used to say that there was no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole. I bet that's true, isn't it?
Yeah, it depends on, I mean, that saying has been used over the years. I have met warriors that have no religious affiliation at all, and so I don't know what the percentage would be, but there certainly would be some who would not have any kind of religious, affiliation whatsoever, and still going into combat. I think it would be very difficult to try to go into that kind of an environment without having any kind of a faith perspective or faith background. I think that, being able to have a religious faith background gives one much more of an ability to be able to have resiliency when you face the difficulties of life, and certainly war is a very difficult part of life.
You know, I used to snap my salute, a little snap in your direction, sir, anytime you went to Germany. That had to be a very difficult part of your ministry. I just wonder if you would somehow come back to Lincoln, Illinois, and shake your head and say, is this ever going to end? You know?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That has to be a difficult time. You're meeting some young men who didn't think much of God as a matter of course in their lives, and suddenly they're right next to God, and they need somebody to help them. And you would go to Landsberg and do that. Now, I always thought that was an extra special calling.
Yeah, it really is a wonderful ministry. To be with the warriors, who've lost so much, when they've been in a war zone, they would come to the hospital and they would have absolutely nothing. I mean, just maybe a sheet over them, and that's it. No clothes, no anything, And so, bringing anything to them, something from the clothing closet, but just your very presence there meant so much to them. And so the transition is always challenging when you come back from a war zone back and trying to reintegrate into civilian life, regardless, I believe, of what your military profession is. For me as a chaplain, it certainly was very difficult, because what you deal with over there is very different than the problems and concerns that we have here at home. And so they're dealing with life and death. Not that we don't deal with that over here, but sometimes what we might get upset about here would seem minor in comparison to what you might have been dealing with a week ago when you were dealing with combat warriors who just came off of the battlefield.
Which brings me to the business of charities and so forth. I've always felt that the Wounded Warrior program was deserving a little extra help. We needed all about it on the television and so forth. And now we have Tunnels to Towers, which, and I'm not sure how they go down the same paths, but they do go down the same path, if I understand it correctly. Am I correct in that, Father? The Tunnels to Towers charity and then the Wounded Warriors. Aren't they pretty much similar but run by different organizations?
Well, they could be. I'm not familiar with the second organization. I'm certainly
that revolved
with
as a result of 911, of course. Mm-hmm. And but I always felt that the Wounded Warriors was a pretty safe bet to put a little extra buck or two for you. And by the way, those folks who haven't written your charity checks, Wounded Warriors, any funeral director in town will tell you exactly how to send that check to them. So, how long are you going to be back with us here, Father?
I fly back to Washington, D.C. on January 1st.
Well, you're not staying very long, are you?
No. Just over the holiday break, But the office reopens on January 3rd, so I've got to be back to the office.
Do you feel refreshed, breathing better air than what you have to breathe?
Oh, I do indeed. Yes, there's nothing better than the Logan County, Central Illinois air. So
there you go.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's no smog or anything like that here. So
now, do you have much truck with the political people out there?
No, not at all. No, my work is solely related to ministry in the Archdiocese for the Military Services. So providing ministry for our chaplains that work full-time and also in the Guard and Reserves and Veterans Affairs. That I'm solely involved with that, nothing to do with the political arena of Washington, D.C.
Surely the people who are involved would need a lot of counseling and a lot of shoulder to cry on.
Yes, and that's where our chaplains who are actually still in service, whether they're on active duty, National Guard, Reserves, our VA chaplains, they're the ones really who are out there on the military installations, on ships, and various operating bases around the world. They're the ones who are really providing that on-site ministry. My role is to assist them in any kind of administrative needs that they have, or any kind of issues that they would need the guidance from the Archbishop on in regards to a variety of different religious areas that affect their ministry.
You know, you and I are going to have to go to a chaplain because we're going to lose our jobs if we don't come up with a commercial or two. Here we are at 8:30 in the morning, and we haven't acknowledged our sponsors.
Okay.
Right ahead, Mr. Ash. And right back live in the studios, and we've been honored, and I mentioned that word honored, underscored. When Father Laible was here before he went to Washington on his military duties, Judy and I tried to book Father Laible, and it didn't work out with our schedules. And not surprisingly, he said, "I'll be back, and I'll get in touch with you." Well, lo and behold, I get an email from Father Laible, and as mentioned, December 22nd. We just jumped on that in a hurry, so we didn't want to lose him. So we appreciate the fact that you've come back to us, Father. By the way, we have an interstate guest. Good morning to Lois Harvey up there in La Crosse, Wisconsin. She monitors our programs weekly, goes on YouTube, and then reports to me and gives me a critique. And Judy scores very highly.
Very good.
Sometimes the old fellow doesn't score as highly as Judy. But your importance is that across the state line, sir. How long are you going to be back with us before you have to go back into the swamp? Don't you have to have a special drink to go across the line?
I fly back to Washington, D.C. on January 1st. The office opens back up on January 3rd, Monday, January 3rd, so I'll be back in the office on January 3rd.
Are you enjoying this assignment?
Yes, it's really been very interesting. I see a whole different world.
Oh my, yes.
You know, it's what's interesting is well, first of all, it's wonderful to be able to help our priest chaplains, you know, who are out in the field, you know, around the world. It's a great opportunity to be able to assist them, and with so many years myself of being in the military, I can understand oftentimes where they're coming from or what their concerns are. So in that regard, it's a great ministry. But what's interesting is that because it's a global archdiocese, because it covers the entire globe, I might have an email in the morning from or a phone call from one of our chaplains in Kuwait. And then maybe an hour or two later, I may get an email or a phone call from a chaplain in one of our military installations in Asia, or someone here in the United States. So it's a very broad and diverse ministry, and so I see a whole different world, a whole different perspective. It's very interesting.
As you get your calls and emails, do you find that people around the world are basically the same, whether they're in Asia or Europe or America or wherever?
Yeah, oftentimes the concerns are similar. You know, because you're dealing with dealing with military, you're dealing with American citizens who are stationed around the world. And so the concerns oftentimes can be there can be some differences, but there can also be some similarities.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a political factor enters into your ministry at all? For instance, I'm concerned right now that there seems to be a thrust of looking for bad guys in the military. I object to that. If you're going to have several 100,000 men in the military, you're going to have 2 or 3 that don't turn up so hot. But I read, well, there again, it's a media problem. I understand that they're looking for misfits in the military. Do you get any politics in your office at all?
No, I mean, we don't really, engage in any kind of discussion unless it would be related to First Amendment rights, where a warrior would not be able to exercise his or her First Amendment right in terms of religious freedom.
Yeah.
That might be an issue that we deal with. Certainly there was a lot of concerns over the COVID vaccination, and whether our warriors, should be compelled to get a COVID vaccination or not, from a moral perspective. And so the Archbishop was gave some very specific direction in that regard related to the moral implications of a vaccination. However, and the protection of someone's conscience and maybe their First Amendment rights in terms of practicing their religious faith. But beyond that, I would say in my limited time there, I've just been there a few months now, that we do not engage in any kind of political activity. That's why we have senators and congressmen and, people that are elected officials.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Hopefully. And I think of chaplains and one of the great, yes, it was one of the great episodes of World War II when the 4 chaplains went down together on the ship that was sunk in the Pacific. And that was one of the great episodes of World War II. And it's not unusual to think about that today and think about the ramifications of that. And the Chaplains Corps is having experienced 3 years in the Air Corps. We needed chaplains too, even in the Air Corps. Great boys that we were. No, seriously, a chaplain has always been on base to be there for somebody if somebody wants to talk. And if for no other reason, that would recognize the reason for a good chaplain. Somebody who needed to unwind and unburden himself a little bit.
That is still the case that we do. Our military chaplains are there, for all of our service members, regardless of whether they have religious affiliation or not. And so, to be that visible reminder of God's presence, to walk with them and to assist them, and however we can assist them, is an important part of the role of the chaplain in the military.
648-5510. 648-5510. Our guest this morning, Father Jeffrey Laible, who's been kind enough to come back and put himself up for a third-degree grilling here. Feel free to call him up, and if nothing else, welcome him. Don't worry, he won't recognize your voice from the confessional booth. Just be sure and call Father Laible and welcome him home. He's been a great addition to our Lincoln, Illinois community here and in central Illinois here in the county, serving the areas that they did, and so make him feel welcome. Father, when you report back January 1st, what will be one of the first things that you'll have to address on your desk, sir?
Well, that's a very good question. Every day is so different. I always don't, I don't always know what's going to be there when I get up in the morning.
Okay. There's somebody who'd like to speak with you, if I may interrupt you for a moment.
Oh, put your headset on, Father. Somebody wants to confess right here, and we'll go right ahead, please, whoever's calling.
Okay, first of all, I want to say welcome back, Father. And also I want to know, does your job require any traveling?
I have had to do some traveling, yes. Since I've been in the position, we had convocations for our military chaplains this fall, and so our first convocation was in San Diego. Our second one was in Washington, D.C. Our third convocation was in San Antonio, and our last one was in Rome. And so I've had to do some traveling this past fall. I do not anticipate that I'll have to do that much traveling as we look into 2022, although that remains to be seen. And so there is some travel involved, but I'm always happy just to stay right where I'm at in Washington, D.C. as well.
We appreciate the call. Anybody else would like to talk to Father Laible? And we'll just cut the mic and just have a conversation between you and our Father. And if you want to confess to him, that's your business. We won't intrude on that. Seriously, we appreciate the fact that you made yourself available, Padre. I've from day one, had a lot of respect for you folks over there in the Holy Family that Father Laible had his hands full with all of you, a bunch of rascals over there.
It was very fun, though. It was fun.
No, we appreciate the fact you've taken your time this morning. You've got a lot to do. I presume, is this a vacation with the quotes around that word for you?
Yeah, it's a holiday break for us. I think the office actually closes for the holiday at the end of business today. And so I took a little bit of time, before the office actually closes. I haven't taken much time off this year, and so I asked the Archbishop if I could take a few extra days. And so, there's some personal time there, but then the office is closed, as of this afternoon through January 2nd. So most of us will either go to our respective homes. Some of our the Archbishop is over in the Middle East now visiting our warriors. Some of his auxiliary bishops are also out visiting different military installations. So they use this as an opportunity to go out and visit our warriors around the world.
Has your schedule allowed you any opportunities to have a good look at our Washington National Cathedral out there, which is a gorgeous building?
No, I have not had an opportunity to do that. I hope that I will be able to do that sometime in the future, but it's been a fairly busy last 6 months since I left Logan County, especially with the convocations, getting ready for those. And so some of those opportunities to be able to seize the various places in Washington, D.C. I've not been able to do, but perhaps in the future I'll be able to.
You've traveled quite a bit of the world since you left Logan County.
Yes.
Are people the same across the board?
People have been wonderful across the board, in all these different locations that I've been at. Very easy to work with, very accommodating, and most of the people that I've been working with are actually happy to have military chaplains in their presence, and so they've been very, very welcoming and very assisting. And then some of the locations like San Antonio as well as San Diego and even Washington, D.C., those are big military towns.
They're big what?
Big military towns. I mean, a lot of military installations. Mm-hmm. And so people are used to working with military, and they were very welcoming and glad to have us there for 3 or 4 days as we gather together.
Now, your new duties, I would use the word absolve. I think I'm correct in saying, would you be absolved from going back to Lansdale now because of your duties that interfered with that scheduling?
Yes, I would not be required to go back unless the Archbishop wanted me to make a pastoral visit, to go back. But I would not be going back for any other reason at this point in my service. I always thought that would be such a special charge to ask to be a chaplain to go to a place like Lansdale where we have folks that are on the precipice momentarily, and other folks who just need a chaplain or just need a friend. Yes.
Whether it's a chaplain or not, just need a good friend. And so that's a very, very special calling. Not everybody can do that.
It is a unique calling. It is not something that everyone can do. Hospital ministry, regardless of whether it's a civilian hospital, a VA hospital, or even a combat support hospital, that's not something that everyone would be called to do. I felt that God gave me the grace to be able to do that, and I was very honored to be able to take care of our warriors.
When you boil it all down, is there really any difference between the needs of the males and the females? Are they all looking for the same sort of peace and quiet and joy?
Well, yes, there's a lot of similarities. There are differences, obviously, because we're, men and women, we're different, and then so we do have female chaplains that can, maybe minister to a female soldier or airman, service member, that perhaps in a way that I would not be able to do that. And so that's the beautiful complement that we have, in having a variety of different chaplains from different denominations, as well as both men and women serving as military chaplains.
Now, you have chaplains from all of the various religions across the board, don't you?
That's correct. Of various denominations, that's correct, yes.
So that if I wanted to talk with a Catholic chaplain, I might see you, but if I wanted to talk with one that was a Lutheran, I'd see somebody different?
Yes, you would see. We have Lutheran chaplains. In fact, I worked with one in my last assignment in Springfield, a Lutheran chaplain, yes.
Now, how are you, to what areas, for what areas are you responsible, Padre, geographically? Are you across for the entire military, which would encompass the world over?
Yes, if anyone is a Roman Catholic, active duty, National Guard, Reserve, if they're in the VA, hospital, if they are working as a civilian in an embassy or a consulate around the world and they're Roman Catholic, that would be part of my responsibility in assisting the Archbishop with meeting their spiritual needs. So it's global. It's anywhere that we have U.S. service members, their family members, any Roman Catholic that would work in an embassy or a consulate around the world. So it's really amazing when you think about it. I mean, there's the saying is that the sun is always rising somewhere on the Archdiocese for the military services.
Yeah. It's amazing to me.
It is.
And you could be sent to any place in the whole world, couldn't you?
That's correct. I could be. Usually, much of the traveling, the international travel, is done by the Archbishop or one of his auxiliaries, and so I don't have to do as much traveling as they do. They do a lot of the travel, and I do the work in Washington, D.C.
Do you like to do the traveling?
I don't mind it. It can be wearisome, I must say. Traveling
Yes.
can be wearisome, especially with all the extra requirements now because of the pandemic.
Oh, yes.
There's a lot of extra requirements involved, and it's not easy living out of a suitcase and going through time zones and dealing with airports and whatnot. I mean,
You don't know whether you're supposed to get up or go to bed.
there
do
you go. Yes, correct. Yes, I don't mind doing it, but I'm happy to stay right where I'm at in Washington D.C. too. I don't have to travel.
Well, that's a beautiful part of the country.
It is. Yes, it is.
It really is.
Too bad it's being spoiled by so many people out there.
There is that.
I want to keep our FCC license, so I won't say anything more about
There you go. Okay.
Now, do you have somebody to whom you report, sir, higher in the military or in the chaplain's corps? Or you're the top dog, so to speak.
Now, actually, the Archbishop is the person that I report to, and then he does work with, and as well as I would, working with the chief of chaplains of the different services. So if there is an issue that we need to deal with in regards to something that would impact our Roman Catholic chaplains, or some issue that would be specifically related to our service member being able to practice their Catholic faith, that would be an issue that he might take up with the chief of chaplains. So that would be pretty much at his level.
I guess the days are long gone, Judith and Jim and listeners, and the guy had a little problem with his military, and he'd go to the CO and he'd say, "That's tough stuff. You have to go see your chaplain."
Those days are still there. Sometimes the commanding officers will send their service members to see the chaplain. So that's what we're there for.
Well, that would be an exceptional responsibility, though. Probably about 95% of those calls are nebulous, not very important at all. But on the other hand, there might be 2 or 3 guys that have some real problems.
Yes.
And the chaplain needs to step in and help him solve to his best ability whatever the problem is.
Yes.
But if you have a problem, regardless what it is, to you, that's a big problem.
Well, right, it is. You're right, and that's what we're there
So you
for.
can't say, well, gosh, you're going to have to go after the fourth in line because your problem isn't as big as the other guys.
Right, yes.
No, he
Who
doesn't,
knows?
He doesn't say, "Give me your card and I'll punch it."
Yeah.
Right, that's correct.
We had those called, we called those TS calls, tough stuff. All right. Father, when you get back then and approach your desk, what would you predict would be the most pressing problem for you?
The most pressing problem.
There are so many, a multitude is that
That's
much.
right. Yes, there are. It would be difficult for me to say that there would be one pressing problem, one pressing issue that would be on my plate. I know planning for the future and planning is something that's important for us as we look to 2022 and 2023, because we have to plan so far in advance on a variety of different issues in order to get everything, all the pieces of the puzzle to come together. So that always requires a lot of time and effort and energy, because I'm working with a variety of different people, and sometimes I'm working with a variety of different people around different time zones. So imagine trying to manage, a
You
various
can't call
project.
a meeting for 9 o'clock.
That's
can you?
right.
'Cause
You
it's only
cannot.
9 o'clock here.
That's right. And so that's a huge challenge right there, is just to figure out what time zone you're in, and then to either send an email or a phone call, and then you wait back to hear from someone, and maybe they call you and maybe they don't. And so, but all those pieces of the puzzle have to line up together, and that can be a real challenge. And that's just one area that I would have to deal with.
648. Go ahead. Excuse me, Judith. Go right ahead, please.
What do you do with the problem of language?
Well, I'm not bilingual, and so fortunately the Archbishop speaks about 2 or 3 different, maybe three or 4 different languages. So if there's a language issue there, so oftentimes he will be able to, to assist. I do work with some other priests, that have other languages, their skills of other languages, and so there's usually someone out there that I can call upon that would assist me if there is an interpretation issue that needs to be dealt with.
And going from area to area in the whole wide world,
Yes.
you're dealing with people whose whole life is totally different from ours.
That's right. Culture, language, tradition, all those things can be very, very different.
Yes. Now, how in the heck do you keep all the balls in the air?
Well, I pray a lot. I pray a lot.
It's a good plan.
Yes, I pray a lot. Yes, and I have there's good people that I work with and that work with me, and so part of it is delegation, and part of it is asking the staff members to help me if there's something that I need assistance with. So we all kind of work together as a team. It's not a job that one person can do. Just like at a parish level, you have to have your staff, and you have to have parishioners. You have to have all a variety of different people coming together in order to keep our parishes and our churches going. It would be impossible for the pastor, to do everything. Those days are over with. Yes.
Yes.
648-5510. You folks are the Holy Family communicants. This might be your last chance to get a chance to, this guy can, he's a direct connection to up there, and so
Wherever up there is.
this might be your last chance to get your last word here, folks. 648-5510. Father, how big is the Chaplain's Corps in numbers? That's got to be a huge organization.
It is a huge organization. I wouldn't be able to. Are you talking about just Roman Catholics, or are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about the Chaplain Corps country over. That's got to be.
It would be
just
several
huge.
hundred for each of the different branches. I wouldn't have those specific numbers here in front of me, but each of the Navy, the Army, the Air Force would have several hundred chaplains, and that would include all of the denominations, all of the chaplains representing the variety of different denominations.
When I think of my Catholic friends, I think of that this was come as a great surprise to most of you out there. I used to go to church when I was in the military, and once part of that there was subterfuge. I'd get invited out to somebody's house for dinner, which was nice. But a quick story with the cathedral in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and a youngster 2 or 3 pews down in front of us was very agitated and fussing around, and mother in desperation to hand him her rosary to kind of distract him and give him something to put in his hands. And next thing I know, he's swinging that rosary around in a circle, and he said in a voice you could hear all over the cathedral, "Hang on, Jesus, I'll take you for a ride." Well, it sure broke up that.
I bet it did.
That was in 1943, and I remember that.
Oh, that's a great story.
21. So we can always relate to that. Somebody gets the rosary out, I think of "Hang on, Jesus."
Your world has widened so. But I bet little children who say things like that you'll never forget
Yes,
are
that's
the
correct.
same across the board.
They are, yes, they are.
Yeah.
And I don't see little children like I used to when I was a pastor here, and with Carroll Catholic School. So I miss that, I miss seeing the little kids,
Yeah.
But it's a whole different perspective. It's a whole different view. Having left Logan County and now going out to Washington D.C. and seeing this much larger military world, it's very different.
Was that kind of a cultural shock, Padre?
Oh yes. To have left the quiet, peaceful surroundings, the beautiful farm fields of Logan County, to go out to the hubbub of Washington D.C. has been, just in that respect, has been a huge change.
Do you sometimes despair over those dudes out there and the way they act?
Oh my! It's a different world. It's very fast paced. It's a very fast paced
yourself,
world.
are these folks really Christian?
Yeah, it's a very fast-paced world.
Get a little jaded.
It can be very intense. It's very, very different than the life here in Central Illinois.
See, we just don't fully understand that, do we?
Well, it's hard to unless you actually make the transition, I mean, I have been out to Washington, D.C. many times over the years, but usually just for temporary duty.
Yeah.
I would go out for a week or maybe 2 weeks. I spent 2 months when I was at Holy Family back in 2012. I spent 2 months at Joy Base Andrews, which is in the D.C. area. But it's very different living, spending a week or two or even 2 months as opposed to a longer period of time.
It just ain't Broadwell, is it?
That's right. No, it's not. Yes, it's just not.
Yeah.
This
it's
pandemic has affected the world over, really, not just those of us here in Lincoln County. Do you have directives come down from above your grade and pay from people who think they know, like Dr. Fauci?
Well, we follow, we follow the directives of the mayor of Washington, D.C. in terms of how we operate our building, and we try to follow all of the directives from the mayor's office. And so I suspect that it would be true. That would be true in any part of the country. You're going to follow the directives of your county, of your state, of your local, your local health department. So we try to follow that in order to keep all of our staff members who work there safe.
Well, and it has to be that way.
Yes.
You can't set aside any group and say you have to mind everything except what the health department says.
Right. Yes, that's correct. No, and I personally try to follow all of those guidelines as well.
Padre, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make, sir, before Jim cuts us off?
Well, first of all, I want to thank both of you for the opportunity to come back and to have this time here, and I want to also say words of thanks and holiday Christmas greetings to all of the Logan County citizens and all of the parishioners in the Logan County parishes. And I want to assure everyone here that I remember to pray for you every day. So peace and God's blessing, and I'll pray for you in 2022.
Bless your heart. Thank you.
Thank
Our
you.
guest this morning is Father Jeffrey Laible. Gentlemen, very, very important to Lincoln, Logan County, not just in the Catholic community, but into all of us who came under his ministry. We appreciate number one, I appreciate the fact that I wasn't a bit surprised you followed through and contacted me. So I appreciate that, and Judith
Certainly.
appreciates that. We wish you well.
Thank you.
Father Jeff Laible is a special man, folks, so be nice to him while he's home. Thank you very much.
All right. Blessings to you.